By the late 1970s, the American suburb had its own vocabulary of innocence. A porch light, a trimmed lawn, and a front door that opened for neighbors signaled a place that could be trusted at first glance. In Norwood Park, Illinois, that grammar of safety concealed a catastrophic failure. In December 1978, investigators at this ranch-style home on Summerdale Avenue recovered the remains of 29 people from a crawlspace beneath the floorboard. The public immediately reached for a narrative that made the horror easier to package. They focused on the novelty of a killer who occasionally performed for children, creating the legend of an undetectable mastermind hiding behind a painted face. Gacy moved through ordinary cues, work offers, rides, and civic handshakes. His neighborhood visibility and business identity provided a level of respectability that the community already knew how to reward. He was a known quantity to the legal system, carrying a prior conviction for sexual assault from Iowa. Yet he successfully reassembled a public life in Illinois, building a contracting business that placed him in direct authority over teenage boys. Understanding how he maintained that access requires a comparison of two specific police reports filed in 1978. These documents reveal the moment where ordinary trust was weaponized against those the system was supposed to protect. This comparison tracks the tipping point between belief and doubt and shows how institutional filters dictated exactly who would receive the protection of the law. In March 1978, 26-year-old Jeffrey Rignall accepted a ride that ended in abduction and torture. He survived a chemical incapacitation and woke up with fractured memories and severe physical injuries, abandoned in a city park. Rignall followed every protocol. He sought immediate medical attention to document his assault and provided a detailed account of the attack to the police. The response was characterized by skepticism and delay. Confronted with the era's homophobia and a reluctance to prioritize male survivors, Rignall eventually took his own recovery into his own hands, searching the streets until he identified Gacy's car himself. This institutional hesitation was a direct result of a hierarchy of credibility that governed who authorities chose to believe. At the top stood men like Gacy, a homeowner, employer, and political volunteer. His public usefulness and confidence acted as a buffer against criminal suspicion. Rignall's status as a victim of sexual violence in a stigmatized era placed him at the bottom. His physical evidence and first-hand knowledge were treated as less urgent than the reputation of a local businessman. This imbalance forced a survivor to become the investigator of his own trauma because the institutions refused to act on the truth he had lived through. That same institutional blind spot allowed Gacy to target dozens of others. He used his role as a contractor to find young men who needed cash or summer work, transforming labor into a method of access. When these young men disappeared, the label of runaway was applied with administrative ease. This assumption of voluntary absence allowed authorities to process reports slowly and ignore the growing pattern of missing workers. Gacy used his professional identity to explain away every warning sign. Strange smells were dismissed as plumbing issues, and late-night digging was framed as routine property maintenance for his business. A series of convenient narratives about troubled youth kept these victims administratively invisible long before their remains were discovered under the house. In December 1978, 15-year-old Robert Peast vanished, and the system finally shifted its tempo. Robert Peast had stepped away from his evening shift at a local pharmacy to discuss a construction job with Gacy. He had a mother waiting for him and a coworker who witnessed the interaction, leaving a clear, immediate trail. The response was immediate. Surveillance and search warrants were deployed with a level of focus that Rignall's report had never received, even though Rignall had provided a direct name and address months earlier. This sudden investigative clarity occurred because Peast fit a specific social mold. His disappearance provided the precise, respectable circumstances that institutions required before they would treat a respected adult as a suspect. The Dust Plains investigation rapidly converged on Summerdale Avenue. As search warrants were executed, the crawlspace finally gave up the evidence of his violence. During the trial, the human lives lost were often reduced to forensic data. The legal struggle focused on the defendant's state of mind, debating criminal responsibility, while the families of the victims sat in a room governed by cold procedure. The Summerdale house was eventually demolished and the lot was cleared, a symbolic attempt by the community to physically remove the crime from the neighborhood. Clearing a lot is a simple architectural decision. Examining the cultural habits and biases that allowed a neighbor to hide in plain sight for nearly a decade is a much slower process. The weight of that delay is still being felt. Even today, 5 victims recovered from the property remain unidentified, their names and histories still erased by the original failure to act. Gacy's final execution at Stateville Penitentiary provided a legal endpoint, but for the survivors and the families, punishment could not restore the years lost to a system that chose to wait for more proof. The case stands as a record of the weaponization of trust. He relied on the fact that a contractor's truck and a firm handshake were enough to quiet suspicion in a community prizing order. True safety is not found in respectable surfaces. It begins with a willingness to listen to the survivors who disrupt our comfort, long before the floorboards are forced to speak for them.